on our board of directors. Jamie's one of our newer beekeepers, but he's gone on very quickly, and he's been very helpful in putting putting this class together, as he's kind of used his own experience to guide us into doing a better job moving forward. Last thing I'd like to ask of you is to keep things moving along today, if you would use the chat window. You've got the chat button down on the bottom of your screen there, and it'll open a chat window. And if you just write any questions you have into the chat window, then either myself or Jamie or someone with the knowledge of the answer will try to get back to you with an answer as we move along. So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our teachers today, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So Arthur, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Yeah, hi, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Really excited to see as many people as we have here. Our hope today is to really, for those people who aren't already beekeepers, help people become better beekeepers. Sarah and I have been working together for probably, what, Sarah, about 2 years now on various projects and doing education and outreach for the club. And yeah, again, thanks everyone for coming today. And Sarah?
And I think you forgot to mention you are a master beekeeper.
Oh.
From the East Coast training.
Yeah, I forgot that part. Sorry. Yeah, I recently completed my master beekeeping program through Cornell University.
All right. And I'm Sarah. I am also a master beekeeper through the UC Davis California Master Beekeeper Program. I also run the San Martin 4-H Beekeeping Project, and our youth membership ages that are in my project are from 5 years old to 18 years old. Last year it was 4.5, now he's 5. And that is really awesome when we see the kids out there learning the bees. And it's interesting because we get a lot of our membership from going to the fairs, and the parents really wanted to get into bees. And so the easiest route is to send their kid, and then hopefully someone will pay attention. So that's a really awesome thing. And we have great support from the Gilroy Beekeepers Association, who has donated the suits and any other things that we need, and especially mentor support. And because of this, we've been able to reach out to other youth and homeschooled groups who are homesteaders, as well as orchid organizations and other gardening organizations. So Arthur and I really enjoy doing the education and outreach on behalf of our club. It warms our heart, and it just makes us feel good that we are helping our community. Thank you.
Also, if we could we just kind of go around and ask everyone to introduce themselves? Please talk about what led you to becoming interested in beekeeping, and if this is your first time, if you're truly starting out, or if you've had experiences in the past. So, Sarah, Sandy, can you kind of start that, please?
Can't hear you, Sandy.
Okay. I became interested in beekeeping because I'm married to a beekeeper. So it's amazing how much you learn just by osmosis. You learn about the beekeeping. I think my favorite part about watching the bees is when they swarm. It is amazing. I don't have to go catch them, so it's okay. And then, of course, enjoying the honey. Thank you, Arthur.
Let me start at the top of my screen. Venkat, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm actually new to San Martin area, and I like sustainable living. I want to do stuff and grow my stuff. So I bought actually a bigger place and moved from Santa Clara, being there for 20 years. I'm just learning the ropes. I never been a beekeeper. I'm always fascinated about them, and I wanted to kickstart as soon as I can. And I stumbled upon this on Nextdoor and immediately joined the association, and I'm really excited to get started.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Very good.
Susie?
How do you pronounce your last name?
Oh, yeah. It's Lakshmi Narayanan. I'm originally from India, but I've been living in Bay Area for last 24 years. And very new, 5 months in San Martin.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susie. I'm in the Morgan Hill area. I've been trying to do bees for a while, and my biggest issue is preventing swarms. So I haven't been able to maintain keeping bees. They leave me. So that's my primary reason for being here.
Okay, well, thank you. Welcome. Cindy and Jay?
Hold on. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. We had no intentions of being beekeepers. A friend of ours who's been doing it for 10 years, his hives were expanding. And one day he asked us if we would like a bee box. And so not only did we get one, but his friend had the same issue. He had too many boxes and he didn't want to maintain that much. So we got a bee box from Santa Clara and another one in San Jose. Yeah, so we had two different beehives. And so it's been almost a year now and we're just having a great time.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And you guys have been very helpful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Mike, John, and Jordan? Good morning.
Hey, good morning. And these guys said I'm going to speak for them. But hey, let me tell you what our situation is. I have some experience with beekeeping. When I was 12 years old, I had my first hive back. This was back in Pennsylvania. And I guess one thing that was kind of interesting as a kid, I actually built an observation beehive and had it in my bedroom and did science fair projects with it. I've convinced both John and Jordan, we're in the Prunedale area, that this would be a wonderful area for bees. So we're here to kind of, I've been out of beekeeping for decades. And we're here to kind of learn what's happened and how to do that and what's going on in this area. So we're here to learn today.
Great. Well, thank you. Jennifer? Good morning.
I'm brand new to beekeeping. I live in Morgan Hill. I have a hive. I bought a flow hive and I'm getting bees in a few weeks. So never done this before. So I need to learn everything I need to know. And hopefully I can keep them alive and keep them in my hive. Apparently that's an issue. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's the challenge.
Especially right now.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Rachel, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Rachel. I'm in the unincorporated Morgan Hill area, so kind of San Martin. I'm a conservation biologist. I've done a lot of research on plant bee coevolution and stuff like that. So I've kept a lot of bumblebee hives, which is much easier than honeybees. So I'm very excited to learn how to keep honeybees. And I also just got a flow hive and I'm gonna pick up a package of bees in a month. So I'm excited to get started learning.
Cool. May I ask what type of bumblebees do you keep?
Well, I don't keep them anymore, but when I was working at a university in France, I just kept like 10 hives of different
Yeah.
bumblebees to do like plant selection experiments and stuff like
Oh.
that.
Cool.
No damage to the bees, except that we painted them after they finished selecting flowers that they liked.
Oh, okay. Good morning, Harriet.
Good morning. So I grew up on an urban farm in the Central Valley before it was basically a thing, and had some skills from having grown up that way, but started gardening a few years ago with my husband to avoid paying extra money for organics. And throughout time, we've just kind of added to what we're doing, not only with expanding what we're doing here at home, but also getting better pollination. So we started beekeeping last year, and we had a mite infestation, and everybody was out of the treatments. So I would order and then not find out for a couple of weeks that I wasn't going to get my order. So I'd order elsewhere and it wouldn't show up. So what happened is the infestation got pretty bad and the bees swarmed, which hurt my heart. You know, I'm wanting to take care of them and they were suffering. So I decided I would get some education.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And Thomas, good morning.
Hey guys, good morning. I'm Thomas. I live here in San Martin, and got into beekeeping last year, right at the beginning of last year. Actually, we had the GBA meeting at Sarah's house, and with the presentation and all of that, was really excited to get going. And then COVID hit, and no more meetings, no more anything. So. Was it last year? I can't remember. Anyway, it was pretty close to last year. And got off to kind of a false start. Started with 3 hives. 2 of them were pretty strong throughout the year. One of them went away with all the smoke that we had from all the fires. And then recently, the one hive that was left that I thought would make it all the way through this spring, they swarmed or something. They just left, and they left me with 20 pounds of honey. So I guess that was a nice little going away present. But anyway, I'm here to learn, and looking forward to the class. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Sandy, can we start on page 3, please? So on page 3, the question is, what do you see here? Because one of the takeaways from today's class is we're going to talk about the different types of bees that you'll find in your hive, the importance of each of those types of bees that you'll see in your hive, and how to recognize them. And in a healthy hive, this is typically what you'll see. You'll see bees clustered like this. And so if someone says something like find the queen, so you have a 1 in 45,000 chance of finding the queen in the hive. So can anyone find the queen? The queen is almost in the very, very center of the picture, slightly a little north of center, and you can tell that it's the queen by her thorax is almost hairless. Next slide, please, Sandy. So these are the things that we're going to try to cover on the. Today, we're going to go over the time and the financial commitment. We're going to go over the biology of the honeybee, major pests, types of hives, protective equipment, tools, and other equipment that you'll need, and the various types of hives. I'm really looking forward to the field day because, again, we'll cover the protective equipment, the various tools, the hive components, how to observe your hives, both external and internal observations. And next week, our intention is that everyone will have 4 stations set up. Our intention is that everyone will have a chance to handle the bees, install the bees into a larger hive. And also we're going to go through how to recognize the different players in the hive. So really looking forward to next week. One of the takeaways about beginning beekeeping is the difference between keeping bees and having bees. Keeping bees really requires a significant amount of time. Sarah and I were talking about this yesterday, and I think conservatively, 1 hour a week or 1 hour minimum every 2 weeks, just checking, seeing if you see traffic in your hive. You don't have to actually go in, but the recommended amount of inspection is at least that you're going into your hive and seeing how it's progressing once a month. For the purposes of this class, we're recommending to people who are starting out that you start with new equipment. It's just easier. It's not the only alternative, but it's just easier. There's less issues because one of the major risks if you're buying used equipment is that you could get something that might have a disease or something in the hive that you don't want to introduce to your new colony. And as far as cost, just loosely, you're probably looking at bees, equipment, classes, probably $600 to $800 just to get started. Another thing that I really want everyone to take away from this class is the GBA is here to answer your questions. So if you take away only one thing from this course is to be proactive. If you're in doubt about anything as someone just starting off, please ask someone at the club, because the sooner you can address an issue with your hive, the better. Because if you wait until you say, well, I don't see anyone coming in or out of the boxes, it's typically too late. And it is, yes, challenging to keep bees in this area, but it is very, very possible. And what we're, again, trying to share with everyone is how you should go about treating your hive for the first 90 days to make sure that hive is healthy and thriving. Because as a window, if you get bees in the next couple of weeks, that colony should continue to grow until at least the end of August, early September. Next slide, please, Sandy. Interesting fact, conservatively, 75% of all of the commercial hives come to California for the purpose of pollinating almonds. So that's last year's figure. It was probably about 2.6 million individual hives come to California just for the pollination event. And as you can see, in 2020, California almond producers produced about 3 billion pounds of almonds, and all of that thanks to pollination from honeybees and other native species of bees. Next slide, please.
And
Sarah?
this is where I'll take over for Arthur. I'm going to give you some basic biology and anatomy of the honeybee, which is really important to understanding your friends in the hive. So first of all, we tend to say plant for your native pollinators to help them with their food source. And we kind of categorize honeybees in that native pollinator arena. However, to let you know, they are a European honeybee, Apis mellifera. They are actually not native to California. They were brought in here specifically through migration to help pollinate. However, in our area, California specifically, we do resemble a Mediterranean climate. So we can kind of say plant native plants for native pollinators and include honeybees in that. Because they like to forage off all those great food sources that you would find in the Mediterranean climate, such as your food, herbs that you cook with, along with the roses and jasmine and other great sources. Who's in the colony? They make up male or female. So the queen and the worker bees are the females in the colony. They are about 94% of the colony or 95% of the colony. And then the other 5% are the drones. They are the only males in the colony. And they are only there for a temporary time. Drones are out and about right now. And if you are seeing drones, if you have existing colonies, that's a good sign that you're on the uptake of a good, healthy colony. And just to let you know, drones don't mate with their own queens. They actually source out their mating. The hive itself works as a super organism. They're hive minded. So that means that they are eusocial, they're social creatures. The colony itself, everybody has their part in the colony. They all help take care of the young. And how they work together are through 3 stages or 3 different types. One is a hygienic behavior, which is that they work together to keep their hive clean. And how they can do that besides just general house cleaning duties is if they sense a sick or infected brood, they will remove them from the hive. Another way they take care of the hive is through social fever. So for example, if a yellow jacket or a mouse enters your hive, they won't kill it because they know they will die. Instead, they will surround them and vibrate them and heat them and kill them that way, kind of cooking them, and then they get rid of them that way. The final way that they help their hive is through self-removal. So the undertaker bees will remove the dead. And it's suggested that this is an adaptive mechanism that they've learned to do, which has been very beneficial. Go ahead and move on to the next slide, please, Sandy. So basically, when we talk about the bee, we talk about the 3 parts of it. So we have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They each have a specific duty that you will recognize. So we can move on to the next slide, please, Sandy. So first of all, we have the head. The head is the information processing center. And it's the head itself has the antennae, which you are aware of. That's the one that senses everything, the odor, the touch. It recognizes other bees to make sure they have the same smell of the hive for them to be able to enter in. The eyes you have are the compound eyes and the ocelli. The compound eyes you can see on the top picture, that's actually a drone. And those 2 giant eyes are the compound eyes. And on the very top in the middle would be the ocelli in there. And those are just smaller eyes. And so they can see where they're going. Then we have the mouth parts, and the mouth parts you can see on the bottom picture. That is a worker bee. That part pointing out, that is the proboscis. And the proboscis is the sucking and chewing. So that's how they get in their food and nutrition and how they also pass that on. Then we have in here the glands that are developed. So the glands are from the mandibular glands. And they're basically 3 pheromones that are important. So the queen gives off her pheromone, which keeps the organization of the colony. Then the brood give off their own pheromone, which allows the worker bees and the nurse bees specifically to know when they're hungry or when it's time to be capped. Then the worker bees give off their pheromone, which is the alert pheromone, which we'll go into a little more detail later. Specifically, banana is the scent that they give off. So when you smell bananas very strongly and abruptly when you're working with your hive, you should move on and pack it up and get out of there. But there are other signs ahead of that to let you know when it's time to close up shop when you're doing your hive inspection. The next glands are the hyperpharyngeal glands, and those are the ones that create the brood food that is the enzyme that also breaks down the sucrose to help produce the honey. So we can go on now, Sandy, to the next slide, and we will talk about the thorax. The thorax is the locomotion and the pollen collection. So the thorax is the legs and the wings, and like you think, the locomotion, it is the movement. So you have the wings out there, it's 2 pairs of wings on the top, and the wings actually have little hooks on there called hamuli that will lock together and help them in flight, or excuse me, not in flight, but for their air conditioning movements or their heating movements. Then you have the legs. There are 3 pairs of legs in there, and the front legs actually will do the collection of pollen, and then they shove it down their body and push it onto their hind legs. And on their hind legs, there is something called the corbicula, which is the pollen basket. And that is where the pollen gets held. So if you see those top 2 pictures, it looks like the bees have water wings and they're going to go for a swim, but they're actually collecting the pollen. So they're able to pack that in, and it looks like almost like a putty or a clay that's put onto there. And they then fly that in to the hive. That bottom picture right there is actually a picture of a queen. And we put that in there to let you know when you are going to handle your queen, when you work up to that stage in your beekeeping life, that on the thorax is where you want to hold your queen, not the head. We don't want to squish her, and not the abdomen, because we don't want to squish her that way, because the abdomen, and Sandy, as we move to the next slide, please, is the source of digestion and reproduction. So imagine in there, the queen actually has all she'll need in that area. So it's a very important area. We don't want to squish that part. So in our digestion, the top part is an actual dissection of the digestion area. So just to give you a little outlook of what that looks like. So in there you have your crop, which is where the food stores. The honey stomach is where you keep in your nectar. And then you have the stomach, the kidneys, and the rectum. So I always tend to say when we teach about bees, bees are like people. They're a lot better organized and they follow the rules. But just like we have all those components minus a honey stomach per se, so do the bees. So when you think about these bees that you're keeping, we want you to think of yourselves too. If you have kids, think of your kids, and it will help you get an understanding of how the hive works. So as far as reproduction, the queen is the only one that is a fertile reproductive component in the hive. The worker bees are not fertile. They cannot lay unless there is no longer a queen, and then they will turn themselves into a laying worker. But because they are not fertile, they will only produce drones. And in that case, when that happens, you've got a major problem in your colony. We'll go in a little more detail later on. Then we have the drone, which is the only male in the colony. And they reach the sexual maturity in just a matter of a couple weeks, and their job is to mate with the virgin queens. And then on the abdomen, we go back, and that's important for us. That's the wax glands. So you can see in that bottom picture, and those little white pieces on there, that is actually what it looks like when they are producing their wax glands. And on the other picture in the corner, if you can see just a little bit, that's a stinger. That's a bee that was in process of stinging. So the stinger comes out and it's attached to the venom sac. And unfortunately, when these worker bees sting, they die. And we can go on to the next slide, Sandy. So here we're going to go into just the differences in the caste system. So the caste system is basically who's in the hive. We have the worker, the queen, and the drone. So we have on the bottom there, you see they're all side by side, and that gives you a good description on what the differences are and how they look like in the hive. You can see that the queen in the middle is long and slender. She is a lot bigger than the worker bees. The drone itself is a really big, plump bee. And once you get familiar with looking at him, you will be able to recognize him. And if you've ever seen the bee movie, the worker bee, or the drone bee is the one that we tend to think of as bees because of that bee movie. The worker bee on the other side is basically everybody else in the hive. So if everybody looks the same, it's going to be a worker bee. The top pictures are just a side picture so you can get a little bit of a different view on that. And you can see basically the eyes really tell the difference. And we can go on to the next slide, please, Sandy. So we have our stages of the brood development. The key thing is we go eggs, larva, pupa, and then we go to the adult when they emerge. On the right-hand side, you have cat brood and you have a queen cell. So just so you can get familiar, the queen cell is the top one that looks like a really large peanut. There will be a variety of reasons of why you might see queen cells in your hive. But for the purpose of this, we're not going to go into that detail. But on the bottom one is capped brood. And just to give you an idea of what a healthy colony looks like, when you see a pattern like that on one of your frames, that is a good indicative that you have a very healthy hive. That also could mean that you need to make a little more space for your hive too, depending on how built out those frames tend to be. But what we want to focus on that picture where it says egg and larva, if you can take a good look in there, you have different stages of that egg and larva. Where you see the one little dot, we tend to say that looks like a little piece of rice. That's an egg. That is what you really want to become familiar with when looking in your hive. If you can't find your queen, you want to look for eggs. And the reason being is that within those 3 days that egg was laid, if something went wrong with your queen, your colony can make a new one. But beyond that, how we know we have a queen or had a queen is if there are eggs. That means she's been there within the last 3 days. So that if you see that, you really don't need to move on any further for your colony. But if you can look a little further in there, you can see the larva developing in different stages. So that's just kind of interesting to see that as they plump up and then eventually get capped and look like at that bottom picture there. And then you can just see also how the bees move on there. When you have a really frame that is pretty compact like that, and there's not many little spots left in the cells, you can move on to your next frame too to get a feel for, are you finding the eggs? Because just because you see the cat brood doesn't mean the queen's there. So then we have the queen, and you want to see that she emerges after 16 days. So once you get familiar with looking for the queen or at the queen, she'll become actually easier to spot. A lot of people mark their queen. It's not something that you have to do. There is actually a universal system of marking the queen that goes on a 5-year revolving. But for you as a backyard beekeeper, you don't have to mark her. The reason why she would be marked is because she can live anywhere from 1 to 5 years. So that lets you know how old she is. And if you marked her and you find another queen and she's not marked, then you know you got your colony requeened its own queen. But she does make it easier to spot in a hive if you're not used to that. And the queen can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. And right now, she should actually be doing that, if not more, because we're increasing our population. As we go down to the decreasing time in population into the overwintering, she'll actually reduce her laying, if not stopping. The queen herself comes out 2, maybe 3 times in her life after she's born. Once she's born, she does come out of the hive to do her orientation flight. And that orientation flight, all bees do the same. It's a figure 8 that comes out. She'll figure out where she lives and how to get back, and then she'll come back out again for her mating flight. Her mating flight can last a day or up to a few days, possibly a week. Mating flight is to mate with as many drones as possible, because she will have then saved up all the sperm she will ever need in her life to fertilize her eggs. The queen herself has a non-barbed stinger, which means she can lay multiple times. The queen doesn't tend to be the one that's responsible for bee stings for humans. She has that stinger specifically because there only is one queen in the colony. So if multiple queens emerge at the same time, whoever emerged first or at the same time, it's kind of a duel to the death. So only one survives. The queen will also seek out any other capped queen cells and kill them as well. The worker bees may assist her also. We can go on now, Sandy, to the workers. So the worker bees emerge after 21 days. And you can see from this picture, a majority on that picture are the worker bees. There are a couple drones in there. So that's one thing to get, you'll get used to figuring out who's who. The worker bees make up the most bees in the colony. For the first 20 days when they emerge, they become nurse bees right away. They do housekeeping tasks, the undertakers, everybody in the hive has a job. If they don't do the job, they get kicked out. Unlike people, we let them stay. Think of our kids, but the bees have their jobs. In the 21 days later is when they emerge into the foragers, where they collect what they need for survival in the hive, as far as the nectar, the pollen, the water, and the propolis. On a peak colony can be anywhere from, you can see there, 45 to 65,000 bees in your colony. So later we'll see a comparison of a hive starting out and a very strong colony, and you'll see the difference. And that's why we want to get you into inspecting your hives right off the bat, because it can be intimidating when you pop open a hive and you see thousands of bees all of a sudden. And we want you to be able to recognize when it's safe to go in and when it's not in your hive. One thing to note is that these bees have a barbed stinger, and a barbed stinger, think of a fishing hook. Once it goes in, you can't get it out. And so when they try to fly off after they sting, they actually kind of dismember themselves. And so then the bees die. So the worker bees do not want to sting us. They would rather use that social fever mechanism to help themselves by vibrating to kill threats to their colonies. So most of the time when we get stung, it's just because it was an accident. A lot of people get confused between yellow jackets and bees. The yellow jackets are the ones that ruin our party. The honeybees are not. We can go on now, Sandy, to the drones. So our drones emerge after 20 or 24 days. They are the biggest drones in our colony. Arthur will speak a little later about Varroa. Varroa are the mites that feed on the fat bodies. And since the drones live or are in the pupa stage the longest, they develop more fat on their bodies. And so they are prone to be the starters of the Varroa. They are the unfertilized eggs that are made from the queen. They don't have a stinger. So those are the ones that when our 4-H kids open up the hives, they like to pull those ones up and play and ask if they can take those ones home, because they know they won't sting and they make good party favors for the car on the way home. The drones do not stay in the hive all year long like everybody else does. They get kicked out in the fall. And the reason is because the drones do not have any responsibilities within the hive. Their responsibility is externally, and it's to mate with the virgin queens. And if they are successful, they will then have died. So if you have drones still in your hive, means they weren't successful maters. We can go ahead and move on now, and Arthur will take over and let you know about the pests and diseases.
I get the good parts. So I get to scare everyone here with pests and diseases. For the purpose of this course, I'm just going to really focus on Varroa, because when you have a hive, sadly, right now in today's climate, it's not an issue of if, it's a question of when your colony will get Varroa. So not that there is a preference for any particular beekeeping method. You might hear of people doing a treatment-free method, and you might hear of people using chemical methods to control pests inside the hive. I think the most important takeaway is whatever method you choose, there are established limits for the amount of mites that your colony can safely tolerate. And so typically, for most of the months during the year, that threshold amount is if you do a mite wash, which we can speak about later during the field course, and you find that your mite count is over 2 mites per 100 bees, then you definitely have to take some action, because the danger of the Varroa mite isn't only that they feed off of the bees, which weakens the bees when they're in the larval state, but also that they carry lots of different diseases. One of the most common diseases that they carry is called deformed wing virus, which does, as it states, it deforms the wings of the bees. So a lot of bees will emerge from their capped cells unable to fly, which further weakens the colony, because those bees that are emerging are not able to mature and then go out and look for sources of food and bring that food back for the colony. So again, if Varroa are left unchecked, it will lead almost 100% of the time to the overall collapse of your colony or the loss of your colony. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorites, the wax moth. It's actually a moth. It's I'm in Morgan Hill, so during the fall, this is very common. The pictures show a worst case scenario. This is a pretty heavy wax moth infestation. So what happens is that the wax moth sneaks into the hive because they're able to mask their own smell, so the bees don't recognize them as much. As this is what you see is typically damage that will take place in a weaker colony. In a stronger colony, you probably never will encounter this. Or if you leave equipment out that has any kind of pollen or bee bread left in it, that's the favorite, because the wax moths will lay their eggs. The eggs hatch into larvae, and the larvae feed on the bee bread and the pollen and leave behind this wet webbing. And as they mature and pupate, you'll see some of the pupa, the larger white parts at the top of the frame are probably pupating wax moths. Next, please, Sandy. Hive beetle, that's something else that you might encounter. In my own personal experience, it's typically something that you'll see in the late summer. It's usually pretty avoidable. There are a couple of really low-cost ways to control it. There are hive beetle traps, which are these little plastic traps that you put in between your frames, and you fill them partially with vegetable oil. The hive beetles fall into it, and then they can't escape. If you do see these, you might see, as you learn to recognize what are bee larvae and what are other types of larvae that might be in the hive. The hive beetle has this very, very small, about the size of a grain of rice, larva that you'll get if you have a real bad infestation. Another way to help prevent hive beetles is because as part of their life cycle, they'll actually have to leave the hive, and they actually pupate in the ground, and then they come back as beetles. Is to make sure that you have something in front of your hive. You could put down a tarp or something to prevent the hive beetles from completing their life cycle. That's also helpful. Or another attractant is if you're using artificial pollen substitute to feed your bees. You just have to be really careful, especially during the summer, that you don't get any type of hive beetle infestation. But typically, in that case, once you eliminate the food source inside the hive, the bees will help control the hive beetle infestation. Next, please. Other pests, again, this is something that you'll see during the summer. In this area, we get a lot of Argentine ants, and they're especially menacing because they'll go in and actually take honey out of the hive, and since they do it 24 hours a day, you'll just see this little line going up the side of your box of ants, and they just nonstop all day long go in and remove the food resources that the colony needs. Mice, typically you'll see mice depending on where you, if you're keeping hives in your backyard, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you typically won't have mice issues, but if your hives are out in the field, you'll probably have field mice issues. And what happens is that the mice like to get into the hive and create nests. There are very easy ways you can reduce the size of your entrance. That's the best way to do it. Skunks can be an issue, raccoons, and then I haven't seen any bears or, and where I have my bees, I don't have any livestock around, but livestock can knock your hives over. Some of the other diseases that you'll hear or you'll read about are chalk brood, European fall brood, American fall brood, sac brood. Those also are not great to have in your colony, but again, the best remedy for that is just to have a really, really strong, healthy colony to help prevent some of those different diseases. Another disease that you'll see sometimes is nosema, and we'll explain that. We'll touch on that a little bit during the field class, what that will look like. And then, as I said, the deformed wing virus. And then there's a laundry list of viruses that bees are susceptible to. Next, please, Sandy. So now to the types of hives. The most common type of hive, and even the flow hive is still considered a Langstroth style hive, which is on the left-hand side. That's the most common. The top bar hives, some people have top bar hives. They're fun, they're inexpensive to build. But for some reason, the people that I know who have top bar hives in this area, it's very problematic to keep bees for some reason in top bar hives in this area. Other people, there's some people in the club that have ware hives. Ware hives are also designed to be inexpensive to construct. Some ware hives, there's different types. There's a modified ware hive that actually has frames. Some ware hives don't have frames. There are several different ways, and bees will use any kind of cavity to form a nest. But again, for our class, we're going to be focusing on Langstroth equipment. The flow hive is also really popular right now, just because it makes it look like harvesting your honey is really, really simple. But again, it's the base of it is a Langstroth hive. Next, please. And then in this picture, one of the things, we'll focus a lot on the field class on the type of equipment, but as you can see from this picture, there's nothing fancy about the actual hive stand. These are just pallets with cinder blocks, and the hives are on top of that. The bricks, most people use something heavy to hold down the outer cover, and that's important, especially in this area where it can get pretty windy. You'll see that there are two different style of bottom boards, which is at the bottom of the boxes. There's one with the one in the center of the picture has a landing board on it, and then the other one in the upper left-hand corner does not. Again, it's just personal preference. I don't think the bees are going to send you a thank you card if you use one or the other. They'll get along fine with either type. While we're on this picture, and I will cover it in the next slide, but I think it's a little clearer on this one. The cover that you see here is called a telescoping cover, which is also very common. You'll see it sold with a lot of the beginner kits. Next, please. Again, this is a typical solid bottom board. And on the right-hand side is a screen bottom board with a removable sheet. Some people will actually get a graph sheet, or they'll treat the sheet. They'll use spray on vegetable oil. And again, I'm referring to the bottom board that is on the right-hand side. And the reason for doing that is you can take that slide in piece in and out and check it for varroa mites. So it's a good way also to monitor the varroa mites in your hive, because once they fall through the screen, they can't go back up into the colony. And if you spray that sheet with vegetable oil, they get trapped also, and then you can just slide it out, examine it, and see if you actually have varroa mites. And then the other nice thing about spraying it with vegetable oil is that it makes it easy to clean. You can just use your garden hose and rinse it off, and then reinstall it, and you're starting new again. The only thing that I would caution people about, again, for this area, is in the summer, be really careful. Black widows love screen bottom boards. If anyone's looking for black widows, I always have enough to sell. So I'd be happy to share my black widow collection with anyone. But again, these are especially risky because they have so much extra space that underneath the slide-in portion where black widows will congregate and build their nest. And I'm saying this because if you ever have to move your hive, you have to be aware that there's probably spiders underneath your bottom board. And then also they have an unlimited food supply because they'll build just enough webbing to catch the bees as they're coming and going. The solid bottom boards, those are personally my favorite. They're easier to maintain. You don't have to worry about, as we go into colder months, you don't have to worry about too much ventilation getting into the hive. They're easier to clean. They're more robust. So if you're thinking of equipment and you say, well, what did he recommend? I would recommend the solid bottom board because you're going to get more longevity out of it. The screens, I didn't mention this on the pest issue, but I've got a lot of ground squirrels, and ground squirrels will sometimes chew through your screen to get to the wax. Next, please. And then on to frames. Now the frames obviously will go inside the box, and it's hard to tell from this image, but there are two types of common sizes. There's the deep, which is the 9 1/8, and then there's also the medium, and those correspond to the boxes. So we'll refer to a box as a deep box, which is the larger, taller box, and then there's a medium box, which most people use for honey production. They'll put that on top of their deep box for the purpose of producing honey frames. And then on the left, you'll see a yellow foundation, and those are inserts. So you can buy these plastic inserts that come with the base of the cell already formed on it, and then they come, typically you could buy them unwaxed, which I don't recommend, or they come single, or you'll hear the term double dipped. Double dipped, in my experience, is the best. So if you have the ability to buy something that's been treated or coated twice with wax, that's even better, because it takes the bees a lot of resources to produce wax. I think the calculation is for the bees to produce a pound of wax, they have to consume at least 8 pounds of honey. So if you provide them with wax on the foundation to get started, it saves them on those resources. On the right hand side, that comes with a strip, so that's what would be referred to as foundationless. Like, for example, if you're trying to make comb honey, you could use something like that. Or if you're, again, doing natural beekeeping, some people who do natural beekeeping they just use the frame. You'll also see, if you're doing additional reading about beekeeping, you'll see these frames with some wires. Those wires are meant for support of the comb, and also it helps prevent the bees from building comb in between the frames, and that's referred to as burr comb. And we'll show examples of most of these things during the field class. Next, please, Sandy. And then back to Langstroth. So on the left, what you see on the bottom, that's a solid bottom board, and then a deep box, and then what's referred to as a shallow box. Most people don't use those any longer, and most of the companies that supply bee equipment don't even sell them. Most people just use a medium. And then on the right, it's oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the migratory lid. The migratory lid is just a simple wooden lid that you'll see on the left-hand side that's used to cover the top of the box. On the right-hand side, again, a solid bottom board with 3 medium boxes. And what you can't see from the picture is you're just looking at the outside cover, but on the inside there's another internal cover that goes actually over the boxes. Again, most people just starting off will probably more often than not have a setup that looks like something that's on the right. Something also to consider when you're getting your equipment is think about the weight, because a deep box, if it's full, especially if it's full of honey, can weigh upwards of 80 pounds. So, and unless you're really trying to prove to all of your friends how strong you are, you might want to consider going with medium frames to start with. Although most people start with a deep box, and then from there go up to medium boxes. A medium box in itself is can also be quite heavy. A medium box full of honey can weigh 50 to 60 pounds. Next, please. Oh, it's Sarah's turn. You're muted.
I got it. Sorry, my internet apparently is unstable today. So we're going to talk about protective equipment. So on the picture here is basically what you need to show up with for next week at some form of this. You don't need to bring any of your tools or other equipment, but you need protective gear. And let me just preface this by saying, I'm sure many of you have looked up YouTube videos and you see people inspecting hives in bikinis or in other crazy outfits or wild hair. And for us as beekeepers, we think it's a little irresponsible for your own safety, and some sort of protective gear you should have. A lot of beekeepers get used to not working with gloves, but if you've been stung a few times, it hurts every time. So we recommend it for your own until you are comfortable of doing this on your own. You can see on here, there are all different kinds of suits. Suits are up to you. It's your personal preference, what works best for you. I personally have a full body suit, and I will let you know that I am allergic to bees. So it's imperative that I be suited up. You can see on those pictures there, the veils come in two different types. There's the astronaut looking one, and then there's the safari looking one, as I like to refer to them. Again, it's up to you what you want to wear. If you're not sure, ask someone in the GBA if they have one that you can try, because it's a matter of how your head feels in it too. But again, if you get a suit and the head you find is a little wobbly for you, you can always put a hat underneath your suit, and it will help stabilize that and help keep the veil away from your head. Because a part of safety is you do not want to look down on your hive and then smash your veil against your face because you can't see, because now your protective barrier is no longer working for you. FYI, you can still get stung when it's like that. It's meant to just kind of coat you. Picture like a screened in porch and the mosquitoes are staring out at you. Then you have your different gloves. Gloves, again, that's all personal preference. The reason why they're so high up on the arm, like you're performing surgery, is just a matter of to make sure that you are covered and that you don't have an open skin space from your jacket or however you wear it. Because word to note is that if you have an opening, the bees will find it. So as you do your protective gear, you need to make sure you're zipped up properly, you're Velcroed properly. If you have someone in your house before you go in there who's willing to take a once over on you, I would have them do it until you get comfortable making sure you're zipped up, because the worst time to find out that you're not is when you're in the field and you hear somebody inside your suit. The gloves can be leather gloves. They can look like dish gloves, or they have, the purple gloves there. Arthur likes to double up his gloves, and it's the reason being is if you double up with your safety ones and then your disposable gloves over, it's easy to dispose those gloves. And once you get into your hives, everything becomes a sticky mess somehow or another, whether it's because you touched honey or the wax, and it's easier to clean them up. I tend to work with a leather one and one that looks like the dish glove, just because I find the dexterity and it works for me. But the most important thing is that you have some sort of a protection, meaning a suit or the jacket with the veil and the gloves. And of course, you're going to want to wear jeans underneath all of this. And the reason why are the jeans are a thicker material as opposed to wearing leggings or sweats or something. And then we'll go into more detail about other things you should be wearing as well. Sandy, can you go on to the next slide, please? So some precautions that go along with your PPE is, again, I just mentioned wear the jeans, wear boots. Don't go out in your flip-flops. You're leaving yourself open to be stung, or open and stung doing silly stuff, like you could have squashed one, stepped on one, or you get tan bark or something inside you and it throws you off while you're inspecting your hive. You can inspect with your tennis shoes on. Your pant veil will have a strap at the bottom, so you can put that under or around your shoe. But I tend to err on the side of caution and say wear boots or ankle high shoes of some sort. If you have long hair, tie your hair back, braid it up. I will tell you, your hair working with the veil will get in your way. It gets all around you and it keeps it tidy. Another reason is because if a bee can get caught in your hair, and if you've ever had a bee get caught in your hair, it will really freak you out because you can't find it and you'll hear it buzzing around you. And so it just adds that layer of protection on you. Next, we did talk about the banana scent. Excuse me. Let's go back to black. The reason why you don't wear black is because you don't want the bees to think you're a bear. Now, you'll watch a YouTube video and you see people in the bikinis. You'll see them wearing black. You'll see them wearing shorts. I would like to say err on the side of caution. Don't do it. It's of course, though, if you have your veil on, you're going to be masked that way. But why try to jinx yourself? Now, the banana is important because that's the scent of the alert pheromone that they give off. So it's not to say you can never eat a banana now that you have hives. It's just don't go eat a banana while you're working with your hives, because you're just asking them to be extra alert and everybody in your apiary to come to the party and attack. So that is off limit. Now, one thing to note, that if you smell that, walk away from your hive, back away really quick. There's only a few of us, I think, that have ever had that smell before, so they can definitely attest that that is the smell that the alert pheromone is. And then the most important thing when you're working with your bees is to remain calm. There are two key things when you walk into your thing is listen and look. So when you go to your apiary and you see your bees, just listen to them. Do you hear anything? Yeah, you're going to hear the buzzing of a bee, but does it sound agitated? So probably not. When you open up your hive, you're going to notice there's a different level of sound that they make, but that's when your smoker comes into play. You're going to listen to that. And then you're going to notice the difference in the sound. And you're going to realize you can work onto that. So you need to be able to recognize those sounds. And then the sound will eventually become heightened. And that's because the smoker is no longer working, or you've been in there too long and it's time to move on to another thing. Or there's the chances when you go into your hive and right off the bat, they will be very agitated and loud. And that's when you decide right then and there, maybe today is not the day to work on my hives. You may be determined, but so are they. And so realize that you may work through your hives and you get them more agitated. When you leave and you're done with the day, the bees are going to follow you. So that's something to think about also as part of your hive precautions is your safety. Have an escape plan. And that doesn't mean like a ladder out your window and you're going to go to the front and watch your house. Right? The escape plan means if you are not feeling safe in your hive anymore, just know what to do. If they're agitated, you can smoke them, and that smoke will make them feel like their house is on fire. And so they'll start consuming honey, and that smoke masks that alert pheromone. If that doesn't seem to be working, you just close up the hive. When you close it on, you put the lid, it's like making them feel like they're at home again, but there still will be those bees that will follow you. There's always that one bee that just can't leave you alone. Just note that. So what you want to do is if you have a shady tree nearby, go walk to that tree. Don't run, just casually walk over to your tree and hang out there. If it's still there, which it can be, then just start walking around the perimeter of your house, your yard, your street, whatever. Look like a hazmat guy roaming the streets. People might look at you funny, but you'll feel better. And then you can go into your garage and you'll still just listen for that one bee. But before you take off your protective gear, make sure you don't hear anybody. But for the one thing for sure you don't do is go straight to your house and shut the door. The reason is they're quick. They'll follow you in, and they may not sting you, but they'll sting someone else in your house. And then someone's not going to like you. We can move on from there, and we'll go into the tools and equipment. So I briefly just mentioned the smoker. The importance of the smoker is, again, to mask that alert pheromone and to let the bees think your house is on fire so they start consuming the honey. That and that hive tool, those are the two most important tools that you will need as your beekeeper. So if you want to think, if any of you have kids, you all signed up for that Babies R Us registry or Target, and then you realize you didn't need any of that stuff. And now you have all this stuff and you don't need any of it. You could have just bought them a box. So that's the same thing for beekeepers. There's lots of fancy equipment out there. You don't need any of it. And if you see something that looks really cool, ask a fellow beekeeper, have you heard of it? Do you use it? What do you think of it? Because chances are someone's already acquired it and found out whether they loved it or they didn't like it, or a different suggestion. Now you can see on these hive tools, there are two different types. Again, these are up to you, what you're comfortable with. For the purpose of our field day, we'll be using that one in the middle there. That seems to be the more common one, and you just will get a feel for that. That one is going to be your best friend, whichever one you decide works for you. And that is how you will manipulate your hives from here on out. And we can go on to the next slide, Sandy. Here's some other key things that you're going to need or at some point. That top one is the queen excluder. If some of you purchased a bee kit, like Man Lake and Daydont, they sell already pre-packaged bee kits. You're going to get a queen excluder, a feeder, and an entrance reducer in there. And the purpose of that queen excluder is to keep her from moving up to your honey supers. The queen at some point may move up because she feels that she ran out of room, and you can fix that. So don't be bummed that instead of honey, you've got babies growing up there. What you do is you find the queen, you put her down to the bottom box, you put the queen excluder on, and then you put your honey super back on. And those nurse bees will still take care of all that brood. That brood will all still be born, and then they will turn that into a honey super. The bees themselves can move in and out of that queen excluder, but the queen by nature of its name, cannot move out of it. Note to self, though, is that queen excluder can get propolized and full of wax at some points, and you will have to clean that off. And I would suggest to you the best way to do that is either with a heat gun to melt it off, or a pressure washer. Or some people leave it on there and they figure the bees will chew it off and figure it out for themselves. That bottom tool there is the entrance reducer, which just looks like about this big. It literally reduces the entrance of the hive. It fits right in there. Sometimes you have to use your hive tool and wedge it in. There's 2 different size openings on that entrance reducer. We use, or you will need to use your entrance reducer for at least 2 times in the year. One will be now when you get your bee packages or your nukes. However you install your bees, you're going to want to reduce the entrance of your hive. And that's because you want to give them a little bit of protection there, and it help keep them a little warm, and as they build up and strengthen their colony. The other time you'll want to do that as we start the overwintering process, or we go into the robbing season, quote unquote. And the robbing season doesn't mean I'm going to steal your bees. It means the other bees in the area are going to steal your bees' resources. So we want to protect them. So a hive itself, if it's on the weaker side, may not be able to fight off a strong hive. But if they have their entrance reduced, they have a fighting chance to fight off those attacking bees. The next thing are the feeders. There are all different types of feeders. You're going to use what works for you. You'll see the most common are the ones on the diagonals, the entrance feeder ones, and that top feeder ones that looks like the mason jars. I'm sure if you've seen in fruit or fruit tree orchards, when the commercial beekeepers drop off, you'll see those mason jars on top, and that's feeding them the sugar water. And your sugar water ratio will depend 2 to 1 or 1 to 1, depending on the time of the year. And the reason why you feed your bees is because the bees need protein and they need a carbohydrate. They're going to get their protein from the pollen that they collect, and they're going to get their carbohydrate from the sugar. So just like us, we need carbohydrates and proteins. So do the bees. And right now, when you get your bees, you want to feed them because they need that carbohydrate to form into the sugar to help with their energy. And this aids in wax production. So this helps them build up their wax in their cells a lot faster versus them having to go out and fly and look for it and bring it back. In this case, you're already helping them. Again, it's like if you have kids, you have a baby, you don't put the baby on the front door and say you're on your own. We actually have to feed them. So you got to think these are your new children. There's just several thousand of them. The other feeders are just one that you can put inside your called top feeders. One looks like a trough that can hold up to 4 gallons of 4 gallons of sugar syrup. But in that case, you do have to be mindful. Do you need that much? Or maybe you only need a little bit of it. So you can still use that and just reduce the amount. I personally, I have those and I use those, and I only put on one side and only maybe an inch or 2 of it. And the reason being is because I have run into mold or too much moisture, or you attract too many extra friends to the picnic, meaning ants. So that'll move on. Then Sandy, we can go on, and Arthur will talk about getting bees.
Yeah. So getting bees, I'm sure for those of you just starting out, that's of interest. First of all, you'll hear a lot about different types of bees. And if you go to a company, like if you go through Man Lake, if you go through Oliveros, Dedant, they typically will sell 3 different types of bees. Man Lake, I know, offers Italians. They also offer Carniolans and Saskatchewan. Sassafras bees, and the difference basically comes down to user preference. The last types of bees that I mentioned supposedly have more resistance to mites I've tried them, and scientifically, I can't claim that one is better than the other. The best bee that you can get are the ones that you can keep alive. And the ones that are easy to work with. The most common bee that you'll find are Italian packages that people are selling. Also, another great source is you could contact someone in the club and ask them if anyone's selling bees. There's always people selling bees locally. For example, in our club newsletter, there's a classified section. There's a couple of people in there that are selling bees. And then the question comes up of what should you buy? Typically, bees are sold in either nukes or in packages. So a nuke is it's a mini hive. It's already going. It typically consists of 5 frames of bees in all different stages. So you'll get a couple of frames with eggs, larvae, and brood, and then a few food frames. And that's easy because then once you get that home, all you have to do is install that into the hive. Whereas packages are a little more work, they're less expensive, but unless you want to spend a lot of time in the beginning really monitoring your hive, I would say that the best for new beekeepers is to go with a nuke. You'll save a few dollars getting packages, but for the time requirement, if you're valuing your own time, you'll spend more time monitoring a package than you will a nuke. Most important on this is just be prepared. Before you get your bees, have everything in place. Know that if you're in a residential setting, that your neighbors are going to be okay with you having bees. And then depending on your area, if you're here in Morgan Hill, check with the local regulations, because if you're in Morgan Hill City, for example, depending on the size of your backyard, that would determine how many hives you can have. I don't know the square footage off the top of my head, but I know if you have less than a certain amount of square footage, you're only allowed to have 1 hive. Also here in Morgan Hill, they require that you have straps on your hives, which are just simple nylon straps that strap the hive bodies to the stand. So in the case of an earthquake, your hive won't tip over. Also, it's a good safety measure to have, especially if you're in a backyard. Like in my backyard, our neighbors have small kids, and so there's always balls or something. I don't have bees in my backyard, but there's always a football or a basketball that goes over the fence, and you don't want that hitting your hive. And then come up with an installation plan, how you're actually going to install your bees, whether you decide to get a package or to get a nuke. Have a water source available. That could be something really simple. You don't have to come up with anything super sophisticated. You could put out a planter bowl or something with stones in it and fill it occasionally with water. That will suffice. And then before you get your bees, you'll definitely want to feed your bees to make up syrup beforehand. And then in the field class, we'll talk about why you'd want to make different, whether you'd want to make a 2-to-1 syrup or a 1-to-1 syrup. Next, please, Sandy. So in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a plastic nuke. These are called Pro Nukes. A lot of people are switching to this just because those are easier to use and they have more benefits. On the top of the lid, there's actually 2 locations where you can add feeders, whereas most of the cardboard, which are below that, the cardboard boxes don't come with that feature. They don't come with the ability to add a feeder to it. Now, when you get your nuke or you get your package, the thing to remember is you should pick it up and plan on going straight to wherever you have your hive and install it. You shouldn't stop off at Safeway and pick up a few items, because you don't want your bees to get hot, because if your bees get hot, they'll start to die, and there's nothing more depressing than opening up your nuke box and you have a bunch of dead bees. And not to mention that if your bees get too warm, long-term consequences of that is that it can diminish the fertility of your queen. So it's very important to get your bees, go straight to the location where you're keeping your bees, and install your bees. If you're not ready, then postpone getting your bees. The most important takeaway here is be ready. Be ready to just go to your location and put your bees immediately in their permanent location, because you have to think that you're taking these bees, whether it's a package or a nuke, to a brand new location. They're not familiar with the local area. They don't speak the local language. So they actually have to go out and find all of the food sources that they'll need to build a good, healthy colony. So that's again why I stress to people buying either of these, that you feed especially while they're going through that transitional phase. Next, please. So one of the things that we're really going to cover in the field course is one of my favorite ways of installing the bees actually into the hive is to put all the frames onto one side of the box. And again, I'll go over that in greater detail when we're doing the hands-on. But assuming that you're buying a nuke for purposes of understanding this, is by the 30th day after you've installed, again, this refers only to a nuke, is that you should see that your bees have grown from the 5 original frames to 6 or 7 frames of bees. So what does that look like? If you look at the bottom picture versus the top picture, that's what I mean by growth. So if you just go down and you count from one side, and again, this depends on the side that you choose to install your bees into. If you start from the right-hand side and you count over, each of those frames, to call it a true coverage, should have as many bees as you see in the bottom picture. And again, especially if you're feeding, and I'm a huge fan of continually feeding, especially for the first 90 days, because again, you're just trying to make a really strong colony in those first 90 days. And then by the second month, those bees should cover 8 to 9 frames. Again, this is with the assumption that we're using 10-frame boxes. If you're using an 8-frame box, just do the math. My go-to figure is that before you add, you need 80% coverage on your frames in a box. So 80% coverage means that you should have 80% of the frames that look like those center frames in the bottom picture before you consider going up. Because the mistake I've seen beginners make over and over again is they add honey supers or additional boxes way too soon, because they're thinking that they're going to get honey out of the hive. So the golden rule here about getting honey is, if you make it through summer, you're probably looking at, best case scenario, being able to harvest a few frames of honey come fall. So September, October, you should be able to harvest some honey, but it makes no sense whatsoever, and it's detrimental to your hive to give them too much space. Bees like to be in tight, confined areas. They thrive in that, because one of the main reasons is that the bees have to produce their own heat source. So they have to produce enough heat to keep the bees, or I'm sorry, to keep the eggs, larvae, and brood at a consistent 96 degrees. So you have to figure, even on a nights like we're having now, if it's 38 degrees out, the bees still have to maintain that 96 degrees inside the hive, and that requires a lot of energy. So the more space that you're adding to that hive, the more space that they'll need to maintain at that 96 degrees. And if you add too much space, they're unable to do that, and then you'll see the amount of brood actually go into decline. And it's especially tricky here in our area because we have such large temperature swings. Even during the summer, it can get down into the low 50s, and then during the daytime shoot up to the upper 90s or even hundreds. So you have to be really, really careful that the bees have just enough space to grow, but not so much space that the colony will actually go into decline. So if you're curious to see how it's doing, my suggestion is 2 weeks after you've installed your nuke, you just pop the cover off. You don't have to go through your frames. Again, I would recommend not going through the frames unless you really, really, truly feel that there's something negative going on in your hive. But if you just take the cover off and you look and you go, oh yeah, they look like they're growing, I see more bees than when I put them in 2 weeks ago, then you're on your way. If you see less coverage than when you originally installed it, call someone, call the club, ask them if there's someone that you could talk to give you a few pointers, because again, especially at this time of year, the growth should be going upwards. You should not be going into a decline. If you're going into a decline, there's some other larger issue at play here. Next, please. Installing your bees. I was going to say you need three beekeepers to install one package, but that's not completely true unless you want to be overwhelmed with opinions on how to install it. So the easiest way is I'll talk about the nukes, and then Sarah's going to cover the packages because she's our local package expert. So the easiest way is set the nuke at a comfortable height near your hive and align it in the way that you plan on installing those frames. We'll go over smoking and the field class. And as Sarah touched on, if you open the lid to your nuke box and the bees seem really, really aggressive, put the lid back on. Don't think that your bee suit is impenetrable, because it is not. Bee suits are bee resistant, they're not bee proof. So just keep that in mind. It makes no sense to just kind of trudge through because it just could be that it might be too cold when you're planning on installing your bees. But in the best case scenario, you take the lid off, the bees are nice and calm, then look at the box and start on one side and look at the orientation of the frames, and then you should have an open space without any frames in the box. You take the frames out one by one and then it's installing them in the same position into the new hive. And then once you've done that, the easiest way again to do that is to take out all of your frames, whether you're using 10 frame or 8 frame equipment, take out all the frames, install the 5 frames of the nuke, and then install the empty frames behind those, close up your box, and then just put your feeder in place, and then just note down the date. I use this very high-tech method of putting blue painter's tape on the lid of my hive and then writing notes on the painter's tape, so I can kind of keep track of what I've done to each hive. You can actually see on the picture there's some painter's tape on the corner of the hive that we write notes to. Again, install your feeder, whatever type of feeder that is, and then we'll go over the feeders again in more depth in the field class. And then just walk away, enjoy your bees. Sarah will cover installing packages.
So I would say installing packages seems a little bit more complicated than installing nukes, but it's just because it's a different way to do it. And this way could seem a little bit more intimidating, just because you get the box and you go, okay, now what? So in your 3 to 5 pounds of bee package that you saw from that previous picture, you're going to have the queen, which will be in a queen cage. She won't be roaming around the other bees in the package. And then you will have a can, which is the simple syrup, or the I got that from Arthur, the sugar syrup, if a feeder in there. So it's just a few more steps involved. So the step one is you have to get the queen out. And that doesn't mean take the queen out. That means take the queen cage with the queen in it and get her out. So you'll have to wedge out the can that's set inside there. And in this case, you're going to want to have a piece of cardboard or cardstock, something to block that hole once you pull the can out. So once you get your the can wedged out and you're able to grab it, you want to use your other hand to have that cardboard. So as you slowly wedge that can out, you're covering up the hole so all the bees don't fly out on you. You cover that hole, you'll set your can aside, and then you'll see you're able to bend the queen. The queen cage will be positioned so you can tab it up and slide her out over it. We'll demonstrate this in the field day so you can get a better understanding. But when you slide her out, then you'll gently uncover, pull her out, and then cover that hole back up again because you don't want all the bees to fly out. Then you'll have to specifically place her in between the frames, make sure the screen is open and facing down so she can breathe. And then there's a couple of ways that you'll then shake your bees into your hive. We'll go over that more in depth on the field day. I tend to use just the way where you just cut out the screen and you just shake it out and close it up. There is one method where you can take out frames and then put it in there and just let them fly out on their own. But you have to remember that you have to take that box back out and you have to put the frames back in, because the bees could actually make a mess of what's in there by doing wax in places where we don't want them to go. 3 days later, going back to the queen, before you place her in the package, she will have a cork on the side of the package. You'll have to wedge that cork out and put a marshmallow or fondant in there. Some places, the way they sell the package, it has that fondant in there already, or a candy. The thought is that it will take the bees 3 days to chew through that marshmallow and release the queen. And in those 3 days, those bees will have acclimated to that queen's pheromone. You'll have to realize that these bees and these queens, they just met probably that morning or that day before. They get shoved through a hopper, dumped out, weighed, sealed off, and then they grab a queen and put her in there. It's an assembly package line. So this way they get acclimated to each other. If you release the queen at the same time, they could kill her because they don't know that smell. And so we want to make sure we have a happy family as long as we can. And then you would go and check in there the 3 days, make sure she's been removed. If she hasn't been removed, then you remove her. By then they will have acclimated to her. And then you would go in 2 weeks and follow Arthur's steps of the 90-day progression. And we'll demonstrate more of this on the field day because it requires more of a in-person look to how you do it, because I did hear some of you have packages And so we want to make sure you're doing it successfully, and visualization while you're in the field is probably a much easier way to be comfortable with doing this. So we can move on to the next slide, and we're going to talk about the products of the hive. So everything that the bees produce is useful to them and useful to us. We're not going to go into detail on everything. We're just going to briefly glaze over these, but obviously the honey is probably the one thing we hear when people say, I want to get bees. One of the number one reasons they say is they want to get the honey. So I hate to burst your bubble, but those of you that are getting new bees this year and are new, your bees are not going to produce the honey in the amounts that you are fantasizing about. They could, but you also have to remember they're producing that honey for themselves as well. So we can't be greedy beekeepers and take all their resources. We can take a little bit. The following year, you can take you can take much more. And then the honey comes in 3 different kinds. It's liquid, comb, or a combination. We'll go into that one a little bit more detail in just a moment. The wax. So as you go in and you clean up your hives, you want to have a little garbage can with you. That could be your wax collector / garbage can. So all that stuff that you're cleaning up as you go through your hives, you save it. And when you when you extract your honey, you're going to have excess wax. Save it. And what you can do is you can render that and you can turn it into a useful product, whether you're making candles or chapstick or beard balm or other things. You could sell it or you could just use it for yourself. The next one is mead. So if your honey has fermented, it doesn't mean it's bad. You can then turn it into mead, which is the world's oldest alcoholic beverages. You could actually make the mead yourself. UC Davis has a mead making class, and there are other ones online that you can do or fool around with. The propolis is the bee glue. It's the caulking that we use for our house. The bees use the propolis as a sealant for their house. It's actually antimicrobial. And so the bees use that as a part of the health of their colony by healing their sick. So think of it that way. We use it in the human world for tinctures for sore throats or other wound control, dental, toothaches. Pollen. A lot of people with allergy problems request pollen from you, and you have to really ethically harvest the pollen. And so I wouldn't say that's something you want to get into right away. You have to go into there with an understanding of how pollen collection works, but people use it as a nutritional source of food. It's low in fat. It's a pure protein, so it's not easily digested by us. So when you use pollen, if you use it for part of your nutritional support, you would just sprinkle a little bit on there. It is in the realm of food safety though. So you have to make sure you do keep that food safety. When you collect the pollen, you generally refrigerate it also, because if you don't refrigerate it, it loses its beautiful, vibrant color and it looks not so friendly. The venom is used for allergy desensitization. I do monthly venom injections because I am allergic. So I get that, and it helps build up my immunity. So when I get stung, I don't have as severe of reaction as I would normally have, but I do have my own medical kit that I keep with me just in case. So if any of you are allergic, I can definitely let you know what I have done for it and what I have in my kit. If you find out later on that you develop an allergy to bee stings, which many beekeepers do, again, don't let that deter you from beekeeping. You can work around it. I do. And then there's the royal jelly, which is the thing that every bee is fed for the first 3 days of their life. And then the queen is the only one that gets fed royal jelly for the rest of her life. It's made from a special protein called royal actin. It's popular. The royal jelly is in Chinese medicine, and it is a necessity for grafting cells if you want to get into grafting queen cells, which our club is currently fooling around with. It's easy to do that. It's harder to get the queen mated though. So you have to think of that. You have to have a plan for that. Next, we're going to move. Oh, go ahead, Arthur.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sarah. Just for consideration of time, to leave some space for Q&A.
Perfect.
We're at 11:45.
Thank you. So I am going to just go quickly. We're just going to show the slides of honey, and you can go on to the next one, Sandy. The honey is made from basically a mandular secretion and mix that the bees have. So basically the bees go out, they forage for the nectar, they bring it back, they have it in their crop, and it starts into their honey stomach. It starts the enzymatic breakdown. They bring it in, give it to the house bees. The house bees then package it into a cell. Then they basically fan and mature the nectar. And when they find that it's reached the right water content, then they cap it over. So when you see the capped honey on there, you know it's good for harvest. If you have a mix of, oh, Sandy, go ahead and go on to the next slide. Sorry, I'm moving faster for the space of time. So you see in those picture there on the right, that is capped nectar, basically matured into honey now. So that is what is harvestable. The other side is the nectar, what it looks like, that nice glistening. So when you go into your hive, that is one of the things that you're going to be looking for is your nectar. And just realize that honey is one of the oldest food products that doesn't go bad, and it's due to the low pH. They have found them in ancient tombs. It could be crystallized honey, but again, it is still all useful and good. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And again, we just touched on propolis previously, and we just want you to see that's what the propolis looks like itself. If you look in there, that's an extreme version of propolis that the bees will build up. And I'm going to go ahead and stop there. We could go on for, you know, a lot longer to talk about hive products, but we want to open it up for some Q&A. And here's just a page of resources. And again, there are YouTube videos you can see. There's just too many out there to really stand by and recommend any. I would say the most reputable would be to go to universities that have apiary programs or apiculture programs. UC Davis, Oregon State, Cornell, Pennsylvania, and they have classes as well. Books are always a good resource available. Those are some that we list here. In our area, you do want to look at resources that are for our area and be mindful that there's great books and resources that are for East Coast, and we're West Coast. And our number one thing is you've joined the Gilroy Beekeepers Association. We're a wealth of knowledge. You have beekeepers in your own area that are more than happy and willing to assist you, because unlike other areas of business, we want to be successful and we want you to be successful. So please reach out. And again, if we don't know, we point you to someone who knows or someone who lives by you, but please reach out to us. Go ahead, Arthur or Jamie.
Yeah, Sandy, can we just open it up to Q&A?
Okay, Randy and Jamie, I understand that you guys have been answering questions. Is there any that you would like to bring up to the board or highlight? Or do we have any other questions?
Well, so there were some questions about where to get bees. And so I've referred people that are looking for bees to go to the newsletter, and either in the buy and sell, I think Arthur mentioned this, in the buy and sell section of the newsletter, we have two people up in the San Jose area that are selling bees. Mike Stang has worked with the club over the years. We're not doing a club function this year, so you would need to go directly to Mike if you wanted to buy. I think the big difference between the two is the fact that Mike gets his bees from a commercial beekeeper up in the Sonoma, Mendocino, Sonoma County area. And again, he would have packages only, I believe, whereas Steve Domkowski maintains all of his bees at Happy Hollow Amusement Park. They have a setup down there, so he sells packages and nukes, but the good thing is those are all local bees, are localized to this area.
One thing to note, Randy, is if you're for pre-ordering, Mike needs you to have ordered by this month for delivery, I believe in April. And so for those of you that are getting packages, something that you may not be aware is the middleman, which was say the people that are handling it on our behalf, they may not be able to give you an exact date of when the arrival will come. So when you know it's in April at some point, you basically have to keep every Saturday or Sunday available, because you will get like a 24-hour or a 48-hour notice that says bees are being picked up, be ready to install Saturday. They don't wait around for us because they are live.
Right.
And perishable.
And perishable.
The other thing that we see more and more of is advertisements for get your bees early. Early isn't necessarily the greatest thing to do, because these bees, most of them have been in the almond fields over in the Central Valley. And during that time in the almond fields, they've been sprayed with fungicides and possibly had pesticides sprayed in the immediate area, though not necessarily right on them, hopefully. Thing is, there may not be the healthiest bees around. So typically, the really good beekeepers who are selling commercially will bring the bees home. They will let them go through at least one cycle of reproducing bees outside of the almond fields or wherever they were pollinating, and then they'll deliver them to you. So you have a much better chance a little bit later getting your bees, of getting bees that are healthier. Also, we had a question about do we have a spinner available to spin the honey once you get it? And yes, the club has 2 extractors. We have a powered extractor and a manual extractor. We rent those out at a nominal fee to cover the cost of maintaining the extractors. If it's the first time through for you and you haven't done an extraction, you're welcome to come to my place and we'll set it up and go through how to do it for the first time.
And if you want to unmic yourself and just ask a question, feel free to now. Okay. One thing I did want to mention is in the future, something you'll need to do is register your bees on Beware and register your bees with the county ag department. The cost is $10. It doesn't matter how many hives you have, but the reason is behind it is we want to know where the bees are, not because Big Brother is going to come down on you, is because we want to know that we have pollinators in our area. You know, our area is the hub for overwintering for bees all over the country. So if more and more people who use commercial services know bees are around, they might not need those, you know, as many. Or then we have a fighting chance for our backyard bees to stay safe versus having 100 hives dropped off next door to you. And then the next thing you know, you think your bees are swarming or super active and they're getting robbed out. So it's a really beneficial thing. And then you can see what else is in your area as well.
If any of you are thinking about getting some equipment, may I suggest that you take a very close look at Sam's downtown feed in San Jose. If you elect to go there, there's 2 people that would be good for you to talk to, and that's Trini and Lisa. When you talk with them, tell them that you're with the GBA, Gilroy Beekeepers Association, and you were in the class. And they have assured us that there would be a discount available to you as you would get your equipment. They have brought in some extra equipment just in case you would like to go there. That includes the bee suits, it includes the veils, includes the boxes, and they've got a regular service there. So just remember Trini or Lisa.
I have bee suit.
Could somebody comment on the regulations and the rules in the Central Coast here, how those vary and what the issues are?
You mean specifically on having bees?
Yeah, are some locales more bee friendly than other places, or are we seeing is it pretty much the same everywhere?
No.
Yeah, for example, here in Morgan Hill, they just recently in the last year and a half changed the regulation to allow for backyard beekeeping. And that was due to an effort through the GBA and the Santa Clara Club to raise the issue to allow people to have backyard bees. But each city is different. There, you know, what's possible here isn't maybe possible in a neighboring town. So it's always best just to check with wherever you're located to see what the requirements are.
Okay, thank you.
There is no California standard, in other words.
No, and that goes as far as to say standards on honey. You know, just FYI, you'll see organic honey and you have to realize bees fly 6 miles. So
Yeah.
you may not use pesticides or whatever, but that doesn't mean your neighbor does, or 6 miles down the road does it. So when you see organic on a label, don't buy it. And same thing as regulations on saying your honey is local. If you ever pick up a jar of honey in the supermarket, you'll see local can be anywhere from Humboldt County all the way down to San Diego. So when we suggest people, where do you get your honey? We always say, buy it off the guy or woman off the back of the truck in the, you know.
Right. So somebody
To be a good
to
neighbor.
go back to the comment, Mike, where are you going to put your hives? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. We're located in the Prunedale area, but you know, we'd like to have several hives, and we may have them in different locations. I know you guys are in another county. We're in Monterey County, and I understand that locations are going to be different. So, but right now, Prunedale.
Okay, well, we have people in Prunedale that have bees, so there's not a problem about doing that. Harriet commented that it's illegal to have bees in Salinas, but I'm at Rancho Cielo Youth Camp, which is outside of Salinas proper, and I've got hives down there, and there's no problem. Now, if you were to go to Pacific Grove, for example, Pacific Grove is ridiculous. They do everything they can to discourage people. They were charging, if you wanted to have bees in Pacific Grove, I believe it costs like $200 a year to have bees there. So, you know, that's why I wanted to know where you're thinking about putting them.
But I have a friend that in Seaside, which is right near Pacific Grove. Do you know of any issues there?
I don't. You know, I'm gonna hunt around, because I know there was a website. One of the clubs had a website that had a reference to all the various counties and cities and what the rules were. I just off the top of my head can't remember where it is right now. But when I find it, I'll try to find it again, and then I'll send it off to you so you can have a look at it.
The Agricultural Department website has regulations on it.
Right. Jamie had a good comment too. It's not only worrying about regulations, but make sure your neighbors are aware that you're going to have bees as well.
Yeah, before I got cut off, sorry about my internet, is to be the good steward of your neighbor is if you have bees in your backyard, point them in the direction first and be mindful of the location and the wind. But a good helping point is to put the entrance towards a fence or towards a taller bush, so the bees fly out and they fly up. They don't fly straight to your neighbor. And that's why we also say, make sure you have your water source, because if your neighbor has a pool and you don't, your bees will find it and your neighbors will be really unhappy with you. So put your water sources out, give them, you know, like we need water. You don't put the water right underneath your hive though, because the bees fly out and they defecate. And just like we wouldn't drink the toilet water that someone just didn't flush in, they don't either. So put it onto the side. So you need to have, and the water doesn't have to be perfect. The bees are picky. They like muddy water. They like mossy water. They like salty water. They like very clean water. It just have the water.
I saw that Thomas just posted a question about transporting nukes. It really depends on how far you're traveling. If it's a short distance, you can, and you pick your packages or your nukes up early in the morning, you can safely put them in the trunk of your car and transport them that way.
Or you just wear your hive in the car with you. I mean, your suit in the car with you as you drive home. I've done that.
I think it's very interesting that the first thing that I had heard is that bees are considered livestock. And I never thought about that, but they are livestock. And so you have to think about, how do you take care of livestock? So when you're looking for any regulations, as Harriet pointed out, look in the ag rules, the agricultural rules for your particular area.
Yeah. And if you lose your bees, you can actually write them off because they are livestock, if you wanted to go that far.
And actually, during the COVID restrictions, it was the bees came in handy because you could travel around to go maintain your livestock, because that was a legal excuse for being out and around.
Yeah, that actually opened us up to be able to have in-person meetings for 4-H, any project that had livestock involved, because you're caring for living creatures. It's not like an art project that you can come back to. Somebody's got to care for them.
Okay,
So
well, we're coming to the end of our time here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so remember everybody, Sandy or Randy will be sending out the follow-up information about our in-field practical hands-on day. And just remember to have your protective equipment with you, meaning your gloves and your jacket or veil, whichever one is you're choosing. You have to show up with those, because we are going to be working with live bees. We will go over how we're going to handle the day that morning we get there. We recommend you come by 9:45 so you can get yourself checked in. You can have time to put on your protective equipment, and then our mentors and us have the time to look you over to make sure you are securely fastened and ready to go. And we have time to explain our escape plan, or when you're and how the day's going to go. You don't need to bring anything else. All tools and smokers will be provided. And the reason being is we're working in Arthur's bee yard, and we want to keep his bees safe and not cross-contaminate his bees. Anything to add to that, Arthur?
No, that pretty well sums it up. Are there any other questions before we close?
All right. And please feel free to bring follow-up questions that day. You're going to be surrounded with other beekeepers that have a variety and a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, we look forward to sharing all the information that we have to have you have a successful year in beekeeping. It's an awesome thing to do.
You're muted, Sandy. Okay, so with that, we will say goodbye for now, and we look forward to seeing you all next Saturday.
Thank you all. See you then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Let me just save this. Okay, and we're gonna leave.
So how do you think it went?
It's funny is I thought we were going to have way too much time at one point, and then all of a sudden we didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sandy, where'd Randy go? He checked out?
Yeah, he checked out. He's right here. I think it went well. It filled up the. We did have one person that did explain that his wife had checked into the hospital, and hopefully she'll be okay. But everybody else seemed to hang in there. So I think it went well from that standpoint. I think it really worked out well to have Randy and Jamie manning the chat, because I could see the chat, but I didn't want to interrupt